it's an amazing thing, actually, to sort of.
Hi, this is Chuck Braverman, and this is another episode of Westdoc Online. Today we have a very special guest who is the Vice President of Development at National Geographic Channel, and it's Charlie Parsons. So let's get right to it and say hello to Charlie, who's talking to us from his home, an hour and a half away from work. How are you doing?
Beautiful, Leesburg, Virginia. Yes, I'm doing great. Beautiful country out here. Yeah, about 45 miles from DC, where Nat Geo is located. But yeah, happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, it's really good to have you here. I was so impressed when I saw your presentation about 4 or 5, 6 weeks ago at the TV Academy in Hollywood. And it was one of the reasons, beside your dynamic personality, of course, is that Nat Geo, it surprised me in the presentation about how successful Nat Geo was. And I wonder if you can tell us a little bit, everybody knows what National Geographic Channel is, but I don't think most people realize the breadth and width and the coverage and the branding. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about Nat Geo, please.
Sure, absolutely. Well, we've had this sort of this 800-pound gorilla for a long time, ever since the channel became a thing internationally first and then domestically. But it was only about 2 years ago when Courtney Monroe took the reins as our CEO, and then right after that, National Geographic Partners was formed, which essentially combined everything that created content. So the magazine and online and the books division and social and digital and on, all of those came together into one new company called National Geographic Partners. And what stayed separate is the grant giving element of it, National Geographic Society. So they're doing the great work of giving lots and lots of money away every year for folks to go out and do brand new breakthroughs and expeditions and explorations. But everything else that creates content is under a new company called National Geographic Partners. And the entire mission of that is for everybody to pull an oar in the same direction. Because as you said, our reach I'll just brag about it. We reach 730 million people a month. So 140 million homes in the channel. That's print, it's digital, it's social. We have the #1 non-celebrity Instagram account. It kind of goes, I think, Kardashians, maybe Selena Gomez in there somewhere, and then Nat Geo is right up there. It's just an amazing powerhouse for us. And then the kids magazine, we offer trips, we publish books, and all those different extensions. When you add them all up, globally, 730 million people touch it. Nobody has that kind of reach. And we're really excited about leveraging that and flexing those muscles, and it's paying off.
Your connection actually froze for about 2 seconds right after you said 730 million people. But I'm assuming, one of the things that I know and that I was shocked by was that Nat Geo is the #1 brand on Facebook and Instagram, right? Is that? That's how does that happen?
Non-celebrity.
Non-celebrity brand. So if it would be Kim and everybody else. No.
Pretty much, exactly. Well, it just happened because this brand is 130 years old, and there's a reverence to it. And then you combine that reverence with the relevance that we're pushing out more and more and more with our products across all platforms. You get a trusted brand with content that's relevant to today, not just in terms of topic, but in terms of consumer and what people are interested in. And that's how you grow these brands to be so big. So the extensions, I should say, to be so big, and these social properties. It's just giving people what they're thirsting for, and with a brand behind it that says what you're seeing, what you're reading, what you're hearing is fact positive.
So who actually owns National Geographic Channel now? I know the Hearst owns a percentage, and I don't know who else owns what. I'm just curious. And how does that work with different multiple owners?
So right now it's just a joint venture between Fox and National Geographic Society.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know
so-
why I said Hearst, but I meant
Yeah,
Fox. Yeah, of
that's
course.
okay. I knew what you meant. So it's Fox and National Geographic Society. It's a joint venture, and that's another thing we like to hype a lot. Is that 27% of our profits from partners, National Geographic partners, which includes the channel, which brings in a lot of that revenue. 27% goes right back into scientific exploration and research. While other companies, it's amazing if they give 1% of profits away, or 2 or 3, or maybe 10 on the outside. Some great companies doing great work, but I don't know of anybody who gives 27% of their profits right back into science research.
What does that mean? Where does the 27%? What is science research? What qualifies as science research? And
So specifically, that is the proportion of the company that the National Geographic Society owns. So their portion of ownership is 27%. So all their 27% of profits goes right back into their pot, which then they give back out for science and research.
and that does not include or does include programming on the channel.
No, totally different pot. So
Wow.
the 73% that Fox owns is goes to them, and they recycle that back into our next year's programming budget and marketing budget. But 27% of that final nut goes right back to the society as their share of ownership, which then goes right back into scientific research.
That's pretty amazing.
It's pretty awesome.
Let's just take a look here if I can find the clip. Let's go to the Explorer clip. It's called Explorer clip, and but it really is a generic clip. You want to introduce it, or should I just roll it?
Yeah, I'll give a quick setup. So this is sort of our brand anthem. It's called the Explorer clip on the label. There's certainly a franchise called Explorer, which I can talk about in a second, but it's really speaking to the explorer in everybody, and that's an attitude of exploration. And this is just sort of gets everybody kind of cranked up and sort of speaks to the larger mission and excitement and adventure that we all seek in everything we do at Nat Geo.
So if you've never seen television before, this will give you a clue as to what Nat Geo is. Here we go.
Yes.
There are those who believe you need something special to be an explorer. Some rare quality that the rest of us do not share. But after 129 years of exploration, we have found that all you really need to be an explorer is curiosity. And we are all curious. We are all searching for what surprises us, inspires us, and pushes us further. This is not a journey for just a special few. It's for every one of us. We are all explorers.
So that's a pretty amazing reel in itself.
Thanks.
How does it affect the? Let me back up and say, are there different divisions there that are doing scripted and what we call documentary, for lack of a better word, and totally separated, or is there an overlap at Nat Geo, or how does that work?
Thank you. I was going to raise that myself. So that was a combination of three distinct groups, two networks, and then the scripted, as you mentioned. So the three parts you saw were National Geographic Channel, which is sort of the mothership. That's where we do big science like Cosmos, documentary series Story God of Morgan with Morgan Freeman, feature docs such as Before the Flood or Jane or LA 92 or several others, and some live events. So that's the core National Geographic Channel. Also on that channel is Scripted, which is a different team. They're based in LA. You saw Jeffrey Rush in there, played Einstein, was a big hit for us. So that's the core channel, the scripted and all the unscripted portion. Also peppered in there are programs from our sister channel called Nat Geo Wild, which is all animals all the time. There's one clip in there from a guy named Dr. Pole, which is a just massive, massive success. He's a veterinarian up in Michigan who's just wildly popular, and some other clips from Wild in there. But so 2 networks are represented, and also the scripted portion, which is in the core channel, Nat Geo.
So is there an overlap in terms of what if somebody comes in and pitches a project to you and everybody looks around the room and realizes that maybe this would be a great scripted show, or vice versa? How does that work?
We're a pretty tight team, so that happens frequently, actually. So I contact, there's a woman named Carolyn Bernstein who runs our scripted. She's wildly talented, incredibly smart. Her right-hand man is Hugh Fitzpatrick. Hugh and I talk probably weekly based on something, either a script that I get pitched and I say, well, you should talk to Hugh, or vice versa. He gets pitches for unscripted things or hybrids like our series Mars, and he sends them my way. So we're in touch fairly constantly, and so we can certainly direct you, any producer, to the right person. And if it's an really animal-centric project, especially if it's character-led, easy to make introduction to folks over at Nat Geo Wild. On the core channel, when it comes to natural history, primarily shooting for the stars, doing the big landmark projects. We announced the other day Hostile Planet, which will be 3 years to make. It's animal behavior and adaptability at the extremes. So highest and deepest, hottest and coldest, wettest and driest environments where nothing should be living there, yet it does. And then you throw El Nino or something like that at it, and definitely nothing can survive that, yet somehow life does live on. So it's a pretty ambitious series. Guillermo Navarro, Oscar-winning DP, is behind the visual, not effects, but the visual look, the style of it, to try to really give the natural history genre a kick in the pants. And it's being produced by Plimsoll Productions, based in the Bristol in UK.
So you mentioned the show Mars. Do you want to give a little introduction to that, and we'll run a clip?
Sure. So Mars, we're in season 2 production right now, very deep post-production actually. But season 1, it's a hybrid. So it's 2/3 scripted, proper scripted, characters, proper script writers. It's not recreation. I'm going to be very clear. There's character development. So 2/3 scripted. It's the year 2033. We're launching a mission to Mars to see if it can be habitable. So that's the thrust. That's driving the story forward. But 1/3 of the program is also documentary. So it's providing our viewers with amazing access to the people, engineers, and companies that are creating the technology that will hopefully get us to Mars in 2033, which is a realistic projected launch date. And a big part of our access is with Elon Musk and SpaceX. He was a big part of Mars season 1. He'll be part of season 2 as well. And I think the clip you have shows the access we had when they made the successful landing a while ago. We're the only cameras there. And it just shows the kind of access that the name Nat Geo can get people. And when you get these authentic reactions to a major milestone, especially when it comes to trying to get to Mars, it's pretty chilling.
Let's take a look.
SpaceX Falcon 9, go for launch.
Vehicles in manual.
T-minus 1 minute.
This is a return to flight launch. We'd had a failed mission on June 28th of 2015. After the failure, the whole launch program ground to a halt. That obviously put a lot of strain on the company.
All stations verify, ready for launch. T-minus 30 seconds.
Elon Musk has said the key to get to Mars is the reusability of rockets. He wants to be able to fire a rocket into orbit, launch a payload into space, and then fire retro rockets and bring that rocket down and to land vertically and reuse it. That's an extremely difficult concept. If he cannot make rockets truly reusable, then he cannot launch a new civilization on Mars.
I'll say go for launch.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It's going, baby.
go. All right. So, what you got?
Well, that's pretty amazing. Were all those employees of SpaceX in there yelling and screaming?
Exactly. Yes, they filled their headquarters in this sort of amphitheater kind of feel to it, and they were on tenterhooks because as the beginning of the clip pointed out, they had a pretty catastrophic failure. And there are two moments there. I love Elon Musk when they say ready for launch, and he can't spit it out. He's like, I guess so. Are you sure? His face is so twisted. You can see the gears churning, and he just wants to get this going. And then when he runs outside, when you perfect place to cut off a sort of teaser, it goes up. But I feel very privileged to work with Ron Howard and Brian Grazer, and they're working with Radical Media on this series to have that camera inches from Elon's face as his company SpaceX's reputation, not to mention the money that is on the line here, we're right there. Nat Geo is right there delivering this moment. And I don't think I gave it away because it was public news, but it landed successfully in the place when kind of out of its mind.
Well, the next minute in the clip, which I cut off, you see it coming down, and it's spectacular. It's unbelievable.
It's so amazing.
How many hours is Mars, or how many episodes, and how is it divided up? And what did you say? It's about 20%, 30% documentary, and the rest is scripted, or because I haven't seen the show, so I'm...
Yeah, so 6 episodes, about 2/3 scripted, 1/3 documentary-ish. But the whole idea is to have a narrative that is, fact positive. It's all, been vetted. That's what we do in Nat Geo. It's all and then the call and response. So ideally, when there's something happening in the scripted portion, we go to a documentary portion that supports it, to give some love to the men and women who are designing all this great tech, and also just to prove that what we're doing is true. And then all the experts we introduce and include throughout also speak to sort of the attention to detail that we gave to the research of this. So everything is sort of, been sort of checked off by some kind of expert. Season 2 is going to be 6 parts as well. And it takes place a few years after season 1 ends. So it's, I don't think I can say too much, but keep your eye out for it because I think it's going to be pretty good.
So when you said you had Ron Howard and Brian Grazer, are they doing the whole series, and they do the scripted, obviously, I guess, and the non-scripted part?
They're executive producers, so they oversee the whole thing. I'm not here to say that they were there day to day, every second. They were definitely not. But I know anecdotally that they were on script calls for season 1, which was a little while ago now. Ron was very involved with the script calls and setting the look and setting the tone, and he was very involved. And as far as I know, they watch cuts and give their feedback. It's a very important partnership because they also work on Genius for us when we had our scripted portion, which is not my bag, but it's with Einstein and now Pablo Picasso. So we have a great relationship with those guys at Imagine Entertainment, and they certainly they were not interested in folks who sort of, here's a big fat check to be an executive producer so we can have some splashy name. We really like our sort of A-listers, if you will, to be an intuitive connection to the topic, but also to get their hands dirty, if you will. And that's kind of true. So, to date, whenever we review somebody in one of our programs who's got some massive name recognition, it's not a vanity project, because I think viewers can sniff that out and sort of reject that outright.
Looking at your bio, it's fascinating that the channels that you've been at that include Discovery Channel and the Travel Channel. And I'm just curious, I guess it's a fair question to say, was your time at Discovery and Travel, their channels now act so different in a way, as you pointed out in your presentation in Hollywood. How does that affect your judgment today? I mean, is it just a total experience that sort of adds up, or do you think you're a different person, having worked at those 2 places before Nat Geo?
Yes, well, I definitely think I'm a product of all my experiences, and even before that was 13 years doing live sports at ESPN, which in some ways was the most sort of influential to me in my career and sort of my decision making and being able to sort of, at least I think, can think fairly quickly on my feet, because in live TV you've got split seconds to make decisions and you got to live with them. So I believe my live experience helped me with that and storytelling. And then between Discovery Channel and Travel Channel, certainly very different types of shows, especially sort of Travel Channel compared to Discovery. The different purpose was to inspire people to hit the road, and a lot of times it's very domestic oriented, and to hit the road and go visit those restaurants or go to those amusement parks or take that cruise. Whereas Nat Geo in particular, but Discovery also to a degree, but definitely Nat Geo is a much more global proposition, and inspiring people to care about the world and to invest in the world in a way, and the health of the world, and tackle topics that are entertaining first, and then there's a little message behind it, sort of stealth learning. I think my sort of different stops along the way have all taught me different elements of what I hope is a fairly effective television guy who just loves telling great stories, because that's what it is to me at the end, and that's consistent along the way. I should say that I worked with some great people, great mentors, where story comes first, and I believe that to be true always.
What were you doing at ESPN and ABC Sports and CBS Sports, and how did you make a transition? I mean, even though it just seems so different, in a different skill set completely, than what were you doing?
It's well, I'll tell you what I did, but a lot of it just came down to luck. So I went to Brown University and I graduated an English degree. I was on the varsity rowing team, so sports have always been interesting to me, and athletics. But I've always liked the stories behind the athletics. I mean, there's an amazing book in rowing. It's called The Amateurs. It's about this group of guys who are going for the Olympic team. It's just unbelievable. And then Boys in a Boat was a recent novel, sorry, it's not a novel, nonfiction about rowing, the University of Washington team. I'm forgetting the year. I want to say it was in 32. But anyway, I've always loved the stories behind sports. I've never been a sort of numbers nerd and arguing about this quarterback is better than that quarterback, and that quarterback should never be in the Hall of Fame. That's not my thing. It's always been story. So after school, I interviewed around, and I just got lucky. I landed a temporary job in the college football team at ESPN as a temporary gig. And then they kind of kept me on full time, and all my jobs rising through the ranks as a production assistant, associate producer, associate director, features producer, which is doing profiles on athletes, to replay producing. So every time there's a replay, or doing the graphics on the screen during live hockey games or Stanley Cup or Tour de France. To me, it always came down to the story. It wasn't about completions. It was always about this single mom who worked 3 jobs to get her son in this big championship game, and he's pulling out all the stops to get to win it all, or someone going for that last second shot. What kind of history is there between this rivalry of these schools, or this particular player? Did the particular player give up a scholarship at the rival school that is now about to sink the winning 3-pointer? Whatever it is, I just love the human drama of sports, and it's custom made because there's a winner at the end. So that's sort of just, what is the heart of the story? What matters here? Forget about the statistics. Forget about the sort of non-consequential moments. But at the human level, what is the story? What are the emotions I want to elicit? And how do I get people to feel those? So then I did that for 13 years at ESPN. There's probably more than you wanted to know. We got married, had babies, and was missing important holidays and anniversaries, and got very lucky that a guy named Steve Burns, who was heading up the Science Channel at the time, this must have been in 2004, gave me a huge break. And that's how I got into documentary, and then that went to Discovery, and then Travel, and now Nat Geo. So it's learning storytelling and then catching a huge break. Steve Burns gave me a shot.
I know Steve. Yeah, quite a nice guy.
Yeah.
So what is Nat Geo looking for? If you're a producer sitting out there and say, gee, I love Nat Geo and I love your shows, how would you clarify the kinds of shows that you are and are not looking for?
Gotcha. So there's 3 primarily things we are looking for, but I'm going to add a little emphasis to one of them. And these things kind of change. So the shelf life on this On the overall thing, overall overview, I should say, will be long term, but I'll give you one specific that'll be a shorter term need until we fill it. But big picture, we're looking for three basic things: marquee premium series, big stuff like Cosmos, like One Rock Smith with Will Smith, which is on air right now, and that's with Darren Aronofsky and Jane Root's Utopia. Incredibly visual, incredibly wonderfully produced, great stories. It's how Earth works, essentially. 10 parts, 100 weeks in the field. It's as big as it gets. These are landmark projects. Looking for those big ideas. Secondly, it's host-driven series. I guess our what we point to there is Story of God with Morgan Freeman. And for that one, I mentioned earlier an intuitive connection between the talent and the subject matter, especially if it's a super A-lister. I think, Morgan's played God. He's been the voice of God. I believe nobody bats an eyelash when you see he's the host of it all. I think most other people, the Story of God with, fill in the blank with the latest big A-lister, you might wonder why, but I think Morgan makes sense. He's very, very curious, and he's incredible on camera. And the biggest thing there is he invested so much time in this. It's his own company called Revelations that makes it, and he traveled the world, many days per episode, and he was fully invested, going into tombs and participating in festivals and holy festivals. So it was amazing. So that worked very well for us. And then the third is feature docs, is a third area, which is something we're very proud of in very short order. In just about a year and a half since we launched National Geographic documentary films, we've been very fortunate to work with some amazing collaborators and create some great product that's been ratings getting, but also award winning. So he called me Malala from Davis Guggenheim. Then we worked with Alex Gibney on Water and Power, the Great California Heist. The latest couple are Jane, of course, about Jane Goodall from Brett Morgan, and our own in-house company, production company called National Geographic Studios. And Tim Pastor, our president at the channel, and Jeff Hassler, who is running studios, are behind that too, working hand in glove with Brett. Won nearly every single award, made the shortlist for the Oscar. And granted, I'm biased, but I think a lot of people thought that was the biggest snub from the nominee list of potentially all the Oscars. And then also LA 92 won an Emmy. That's from Lightbox, Simon and Jonathan Chin. Tons of hardware on their shelves. And of course, TJ Martin and Dan Lindsay were the directors. They've won Oscars as well. So a lot of firepower behind LA 92, which is an archive-only look back at the 1992 LA riots after the Rodney King beating and the cops were let off. It's an amazing, emotional topic. And then a couple others would be Before the Flood with Leo DiCaprio from about a year and a half ago. Very powerful way to talk about climate change. And I guess one other I can spin forward just a little bit is we announced two others, one called Okavango, about the Okavango Delta, and so how precious that is. And then one with Alex Honnold, the solo free climber when he climbed El Capitan. That's from Jimmy Chin, and we're really excited about those that are coming up. But I'll say one more point about our feature docs is we want to start a conversation, and we also like to find bigger topics and find a narrow way in, as opposed to a sort of smaller niche topic and then trying to get people to care about it. I think that's more tricky. For example, Jane, how many docs have been made about Jane Goodall? I'll tell you, a lot. And we found this way to use archive, this treasure trove of archive that we found in our own archives, and matched it up with a master interview with Jane Goodall and told an amazing story. And LA 92 as well. I think there were at least 6 that came out, LA riot documentaries at the time, and ours sort of rose above the batch, just because I think of this unique storytelling, archive only, that Simon and Jonathan and TJ and Dan implemented. So
how did that doc come about? Did they come to you with a concept, or?
Yes, Simon and Jonathan, came to us and fell in love immediately and just had to do it. And then TJ and Dan came in, and the rest is history, as they say. It's handcrafted, it's beautiful, it's seamless, and of course, it's an observation or a commentary on post-Ferguson America without ever sort of shoehorning in the very obvious on-the-nose line. You just get it.
The irony, which I never realized until just now, and maybe you have thought about it or haven't, is that one of the things that makes that doc really great is that it does not have in doc world the voice of God telling you everything that you're looking at, and you have the voice of God on your network.
Yeah, exactly. I'll add one more thing to LA92. Not only is there no voice of God, there's not even any contemporary interview and then audio only. Everything is from back in the day.
Right.
It's as if you got in a phone booth, the thing spun around and dropped you into burning Los Angeles in the heart of the action, and you're just ducking for cover.
And was there
really, really palpable?
Was there a conversation in the room at Nat Geo before this project was, before you saw rough cuts and somebody was saying, you can't just show clips together without a narrator or without interviews? How are they going to do that, right? Did that go on, or did you just say, oh, these guys are great, they're going to do it?
So I can tell you anecdotally, a quick sidebar, answer that in a second. A quick sidebar at Nat Geo, we have a development team of which I'm part, and Alan Ayers runs it in our DC office. We've got a New York presence, and of course some London development execs as well. And then there's a separate production team. So once a show gets greenlit, we have an internal handoff, and then the production unit goes and makes it. So sadly to me, you can lose touch with some of these projects because they go over to production, and we've got to turn around and look for the next one. So I can only tell you anecdotally that I think there was a lot of discussion about could that really work. And then eventually it was Tim Pastor and sort of Courtney Monroe, I think, taking a leap of faith that, listen, let's let these guys work their magic. They've got Oscars and Emmys, it's like, one for the thumb, as it were, like with sports when you have so many rings from championships, they need one for the thumb. They've got four. Just let them do their thing. They've won these awards for a reason, and finally said, let's go for it. Then they just proved that it's just there's no other way to do it if you want to be immersive and authentic and the most emotionally impactful.
About the time that you left ESPN and went to, I guess, Discovery with Steve, was that the switch there? 2000? What did you say? 4?
I think. Yeah.
It was around the time when agents were starting to sniff around this business. And before that, I would say, if you went to a conference, there were no agents. There was nobody in a suit there, number one. And so you would always spot an agent, right, with a suit on. But there was no CAA or ICM or William Morris on any of these kind of nonfiction series or shows or anything. So my question really is, if you're a young filmmaker and you want to make some shows for Nat Geo, do you have to have an agent, or what's your advice about approaching Nat Geo?
Well, I guess if that's the question, do you have to have an agent? I think the answer is no. Is it really good to have an agent? The answer is yes. I think the agent does a lot of things. It adds credibility to your pitch and your company. And it also lets them sort of direct your pitch to the right networks. So they do a great job, in my experience, sort of filtering out, this will work or this won't work. When you pitch it, make sure you acknowledge this might be a center, but you have a way to mold it back in, or they can lay out the variables up front. So someone like myself, who's constantly reading pitches and taking pitches, I don't the risk is I sort of say, no, this isn't for us very quickly, when they have a way to customize the materials. Because I do realize it's very tricky for folks to customize materials. It's a big investment. But the days are definitely gone when one tape can go to multiple networks, 4, 5, 6, 7 networks, and then, just torque this one or torque that way, and then it'll fit. Things have to be much more customized. The other thing I would suggest is, if you don't want to go the agent route, is to partner with a larger production company up front, because oftentimes we would suggest that and sometimes insist upon it afterwards, because good ideas come from anywhere. That we firmly believe. So we take a lot of pitches from not everybody's a big boy. Sometimes they're up and comers or one man or one woman bands, and then we definitely would partner them up, just to make sure that the back office is there, and that sort of the horsepower and firepower is there to deliver shows with the budgets that we're able to offer. So we're very lucky to offer very large budgets, and we got to make sure everything goes smoothly. These are big investments. So long answer is, I would suggest an agent. I would say 99% of our projects come in through an agent or have an agent attached. It's not required, but it's very rare that we approach we deal with somebody without an agent.
What I didn't say, and doesn't really have so much to do with agents, but you used to be able to walk in with a page and say, here's an idea. Do you like this? And they'd say, yes. And okay, go ahead. I mean, now you need to have, you know, a sizzle reel and 12 executive producers and another sizzle reel. And there is a clip that you gave me, which I think is pretty extraordinary, which I'm going to let run, and then I'm going to run for 90 seconds, I think, and then you can tell us about this clip.
Perfect.
You want to know about breathing? Ask this guy.
My first spacewalk, holding on to the outside of the spaceship with nothing except the sound of my own breathing. In my one hand is my entire link with my own history. Everything that's human, every story that's going on down on the surface of the world, everybody I've ever met, with the whole universe in the other direction. And then I let go. That's when you really appreciate the significance of that thin blue line. It contains everything that's important to us. It contains life. And then Houston called to get back to work. I grabbed back onto the handrail. But while I was working, suddenly, I had a searing pain in my left eye. Like somebody had just stabbed me. My eye just snapped shut, and it started tearing up. But the trouble is, without gravity, tears don't fall. The tear just gets bigger and bigger. Got big enough that it became a little lake of water that went across the bridge of my nose into my other eye. So I called down to Houston. Houston, I'm having a problem here. I can't see, I'm blinded in both eyes. What did he just say? He's blind?
You're good with the cliffhangers, I'll tell you, Chuck.
Yeah, you don't want to be blind floating around in space. I know that for a fact. So what is that from, and what is that about?
Thanks for playing that one. I love that one too. So that's a series called One Strange Rock. It's kind of in the middle of the run right now. So this was a pitch from Jane Root's Newtopia. She's incredibly talented. It was actually my boss at Discovery for a while, and her company Newtopia, if I didn't say that already. So she came and pitched a wildly ambitious How Earth Works pitch. Earth the Machine. 10 parts, big budget, glossy landmark, the whole thing. We bought it, ready to rock and roll. Then we thought, how can we plus this up even more? Darren Aronofsky, and you could probably, if you're an Aronofsky fan, you saw some of his influence in there. Darren Aronofsky sort of popped to mind, and his company Protozoa, and his right-hand man, Ari Handel, who's incredibly brilliant and creative. They sort of joined the team, and the production team spent a week in Brooklyn sort of tearing apart the original format that we bought and the stories that we bought, and tore it apart and built it back up together, and then tore it apart again, and then built it back and tore it apart again. And it just the sort of the passion that these groups had was amazing. And then after we had a sort of a general idea of what we wanted to do, 100 weeks of production, which is pretty awesome. Then we thought, well, who's going to be telling us the stories? Someone had the idea, and I don't know who. I wish I could give someone credit, but it turned out to be astronauts, because there's 7 billion people on the planet, but 600 and change have been to the space station or beyond. They have a very unique point of view on this blue marble on which we live, and nobody can tell about the fragility of life, about the importance of preserving the planet, of the amazing visuals that they've seen when they were going around Earth at, I think it's 16,000 miles an hour. So they are only spokespeople. So the only interviews, I should say, are these astronauts. And that was Chris Hadfield, Canadian astronaut, who's unbelievably good. And he was telling that story about how he was on a spacewalk, and he gets this tear in his eye, and it starts stinging like mad. And what's how it could eventually just start filling up, because it just starts blocking his eyes and obscuring his vision, and that's not a good thing when you're on a spacewalk. So, not to give it away, but eventually, because you can watch it, hopefully you will watch it. But he eventually decides to purge the suit, so it shoots everything out, and there goes all of his oxygen. So his relationship with air, when he hits that button, all of his air is gone from his suit. His relationship to air is very different from mine, where I just walk around and breathe and don't even think about it. So he's going to go a moment without any oxygen, and hopefully when he releases the button, his O2 starts pumping back in, and obviously it did. But that was just a cool story to get us into the episode called Gasp, which is about the importance of air and our atmosphere. So it's really, really fun series. I encourage you to jump in or catch up on VOD, but it's super glossy, super visual, and it's really a fun ride, and it's doing very well for us.
Well, one of the advantages of being a member of the Television Academy now, I finally have come to realize, is now, if you're a member, I hope you are, I assume you are, your mailbox and my mailbox is filled up with way too many these round discs. I think they're called DVDs, but they're going away. But they're still sending them out. They're still sending them out. And so I can catch up on some of the shows I haven't seen.
So one thing I just want to point out is it's important to know that you don't need to have these big A-listers in your back pocket. In fact, I would say a lot of our ideas, maybe most of them, don't have those big names attached from the get-go. So we fall in love with an idea, we develop it very deeply, and then oftentimes we sort of get a green light with contingencies from our CEO. So we'll pitch an idea with a big name attached. She'll say, yes, it is greenlit if you can land that person. And that way we have a green light in our pocket, because we probably won't get anybody we really want without a green light. But when we have it, we can get going and use all sorts of contacts to get the treatment and the materials in front of the person. And then it's a much easier conversation to say, hey, this is greenlit. If you want to do it, we start production in 3 months.
So I think we're just about done, but I don't think I've asked you about new shows coming up. Do you want to alert us to what to be watching for, or what?
Sure.
What's coming up around the corner?
Sure. I was able to sneak in a couple along the way there. Hostile Planet, the big natural history one, which very, very excited about. I slipped in our 2 feature docs. And I'll add a third feature. I talked about the Alex Honnold climbing El Capitan without a rope, which will, if you get vertigo, you may not want to watch this one. No, please watch it anyway, but just do whatever you just sit down or hold on to the couch, because we need the eyeballs. But Alex Honnold climbing without ropes on El Capitan is just heart-thumpingly
Who shot
awesome.
that?
So it's Jimmy Chin, and his crew, and it's just we're embedded with literally embedded. We're inside Alex's van as he travels around, and it's sort of all access to him while he trains, and finally decides to go for it one morning, and it's just awesome. And I snuck in Okavango, one more called Science Fair, which was an acquisition, and I think it won the audience award at least Sundance, Sun Valley, and South by Southwest. And it's about these amazing kids who compete at the Intel Science and Engineering Fair, and just the next generation of geniuses. And so not only is it inspiring, but it is laugh out loud funny. These kids, between the self-awareness mixed with the confidence, mixed with the awkwardness of being 17-year-old, way smarter than your peers, with some cockiness, and the teachers, their mentors at these schools, because we follow different kids as they lead up to this massive science fair. The teachers are tough as nails, inspirational, no nonsense, smart as whips, care deeply. It's the cast of characters. You couldn't cast them better. So it's going to come out in a little while, but we picked that one up at a festival called Science Fair. Really excited about that one. And I guess season 3 of Story of God is underway, and that should be great. That's our highest rated series of all time. So we're excited about that. And I think we announced Chain of Command, which we had a series called Chain of Command, and now we're doing a sort of spin-off of that, if you will, about the Secret Service. So we're embedded with the Secret Service. So we'll do a couple episodes tagging along with the brave men and women of the USSS.
Well, it's been wonderful. I'm sure the minute that I say thank you and we sign off, I'm going to think of 10 more questions, which is usually the way it goes. But
Well, no problem. If you ever want more of this, I'm happy to do this anytime.
I'll call you at 4 o'clock this morning and see. Let's do it. Let's do an add-on. Thank you, Charlie Parsons, the Vice President of Development of National Geographic Channel. I can't wait actually to go run to my television set and turn it on and see what's playing right now. Thank you.
Please do. Thank you so much, Chuck.
It's an amazing thing, actually, to sort of